Manila, and welcome to a special series of Ailing Our PH entitled eHealth Webinars in the Philippines. So it is a series of online meeting and sharing session about the updates, issues and challenges and future trends of eHealth and the various underlying themes in the health IT industry. It is moderated by the students from the Master of Science in Health Informatics of UP Manila who are taking their seminars in health informatics class under Dr. John of Australia. It's already 9:16 a.m. here in the Philippines, and we're broadcasting live at the University of the Philippines. Now, before we start, please be reminded of our four things in this meeting. So we have the platform, how to participate, the program details, and the email feedback. First, we're now using Cisco WebEx Event Center. So if you are encountering problems as you participate, please log out and rejoin in our WebEx website. The link is tinyurl.com/ainourph. Our meeting room number is 867-584-771, and our password is Manila123. Second, your microphone will be on mute during the meeting, but you can participate in three ways. That's by sending your feedback, chatting your response, and posting your questions. Send feedback by clicking the feedback button on the right side of your screen below the participants window. It's a dialog balloon with a check mark. Now on the drop-down, you can respond by saying yes or no, say if the presentation is too fast or too slow, appreciate the speaker with an applause, and send your virtual laughter. You can also send a message to the host or panelist in the chat box beside the participant button. I strongly encourage you to chat your thoughts and insights here, and we'll just answer questions. Now you can only chat to either the host and or the presenter and not to all the participants. You can also post your questions by selecting the person you want to ask and then type in your query. Please note the difference between the chat box and the question box so that we can respond to important queries. Now for the program details, the session will run for 45 minutes to an hour. And as mentioned, you can send your questions to the Q&A box, and we'll be addressing them accordingly. Lastly, after this webinar, you can check your email and please answer the evaluation form. So that's it. You now know the four things to remember in the session. That's the platform, how to participate, the program, and the email feedback. Now let me first introduce to you our speaker. Mark Smith is a sociologist specializing in the social organization of online communities and computer-mediated interaction. He founded and managed the Community Technologies Group at Microsoft Research in Redmond, Washington, and led the development of social media reporting and analysis tools for intelligent systems. He leads the Connected Action Consulting Group, is a co-founder and now director of the Social Media Research Foundation, which is dedicated to open tools, open data, and open scholarship related to social media. His research focuses on computer-mediated collective action, the ways group dynamics change when they take place in and through social cyberspaces. He received a Bachelor of Science in International Area Studies from Drexel University in Philadelphia, a Master of Philosophy in Social Theory from Cambridge University, and a Doctor of Philosophy in Sociology from UCLA. He is also a distinguished visiting scholar at MediaX program at Stanford University. Okay, so actually Mark Smith was here late last year. He was supposed to meet the students from the program. Apparently it was a holiday, but glad he accepted our invitation. So I know you're all excited as much as I do. So please welcome Mr. Mark Smith. Hi, Mark. I just passed over your privileges to you.
Very good. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clear.
Oh, very good. Okay. Well, welcome and thank you for your time and attention. Can I now show my screen?
Oh, yes, please.
Let's see. Let me see how I do that.
I'll just go to Quick Start. There's a share screen option.
Quick start. I see. Share
Okay.
screen. Got it. Okay. Very good.
Okay.
So let's see. Let's start here and see if you can see this screen.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Well, I'm going to work from a few web pages and from a slide deck. Most of these resources can be found on the web, and you're welcome to email me after this discussion, and I'm happy to share with you any additional resources, including our book about social network analysis. I guess I should start with some slides that set up my story. First, I'm available in a lot of ways on the internet, and I am trained as a sociologist. My background is in collective action dilemmas, or the question of why groups can't always get things done very effectively. I was trained in an area known as interactionist sociology, which is how people signal to each other. And the one method that in some ways integrates the others is network analysis, the analysis of relationships or collections of connections. But I take these three traditions and I apply them to social media. And my goal is to, in many ways, reveal patterns that are now hidden in the collections of messages, the streams of links and likes and tweets and so on. But my story in some ways starts here in Tahrir Square. This is a picture of a lot of people in Tahrir. And at its maximum, I believe about 750,000 people can be crammed into Tahrir. More than that, there just isn't enough room, and of course, if they get angry with each other, the number goes down significantly. If I told you that this was a picture of Tahrir right now, that would be newsworthy, and it might find its way to the front page of your newspaper, or here in the US, it might end up on the front page of the New York Times. And so a picture of a crowd can be a very, very newsworthy artifact. Crowds themselves are newsworthy artifacts. When a group gets together, it means that social change is possible. And yet, here we can see Mr. Obama speaking to a crowd. But he's pointing here to the tweet stream of people talking about Obama. And I believe his point was that Twitter seems to do damage to the crowd. Looking out in front of him, no doubt, he can see how big the crowd is. Is it divided? Are they waving signs? Are they angry? Are they frightened? Are they hot and tired? You can learn a lot just by looking at a crowd. And yet you cannot learn any of those things by looking at a tweet stream. When I look at that tweet stream, questions like, is the most important tweet the tweet at the top? No, that's the most recent tweet. And so we actually have a word for the condition in which you consider new things to be important things. That's called the attention deficit disorder. So what we want to be able to do is reveal some of the structure of this crowd, the crowd that has gathered in Twitter to talk about Obama, or for that matter, talk about anything. But we want to actually see its shape, its size, its divisions, its structure. And we just can't do it with Twitter itself. We need to build a different tool. We need to build a different image of social media. And we did. It looks like this. This is a crowd in Twitter talking about Obama. And as you look at it, you may recognize that it's not just one crowd, it seems, but it's a few crowds, and they're divided in many ways. They're not all that well connected. There's some connection, but not that much connection between these groups. And the words at the top, these are automatically extracted and analyzed words. These are the hashtags used most frequently by the people in that group. And the group itself was formed by the mathematical analysis, an algorithm called a clustering algorithm that found that some people were more connected to each other than they were to people elsewhere in the graph. And so it found neighborhoods, communities, subgroups. What it also found were opinion tribes. Because when we, here in the US anyway, look at this, we can very quickly go, oh yes, Republicans and Democrats. The reds are the Republicans and the blues are the Democrats. And they're talking about Obama, and when they do, they use different hashtags, they use different words, and they don't necessarily connect to each other all that much. Right and left actually don't connect that much, at least in US topics. So our challenge is to enable the analysis of topics in social media in places like Twitter, but also Facebook and YouTube and Flickr. And our goal is to make it easy to get these kinds of pictures. In some ways, what we're trying to do is produce this. This is one of the first consumer photography devices, the Kodak Brownie snapshot camera. Before this device, photography was a profession, exclusively a professional activity. You had to really know what you were doing. After this device, almost anybody could point the box, press a button, and go back to a drugstore, pay them $5 US, wait 3 weeks, get 12 black and white photos and a new wooden box. This is Instagram 1.0. Anybody could do that. And they did. And the result was something on the order of 1 trillion photos taken from the 1920s until about the end of the chemical photography era, around 2008, when the Kodak Corporation filed for bankruptcy. So what we're trying to do is make it so that almost anybody could get a box, point it into cyberspace, press a button, and get a network graph, a picture of the crowd. And what we're leveraging is the fact that all social media forms social networks. Even the social media that is not called a social network forms a social network. So email has a social network. Your phone calls form a social network. So what we want to do is help people recognize that. Is there an open mic there? And I wonder if that could get muted. Okay. So what we're looking for is a way of looking at social media so that we see in it the web of connections. What we're looking at is not just that there is a person A and that person has some attributes. What we want to know is that A has a connection to B. And then we may or may not have information that shows that B is connected to A. In some cases, A and B share a mutual connection. And so there are different ways that people can be connected. In some cases, they're connected to each other, but unevenly, with one person initiating connection far more often than another. In some cases, people have more than one kind of connection. And so what we're interested in doing is making network analysis accessible to people who do not know how to program. And if you are not a programmer, this is a good thing, and it's also a challenge, because if you can't write software that opens up connections to databases and pulls out data and manipulates it, then you have some limitations. You're not going to be able to think link, to look at the world as a web of connections. And that's a shame because the world seems to be a web of connections. This model of things connected to things, but not everything being connected to everything, seems to capture a lot of the world, a part of the world that we have, for the most part, missed in a lot of our common methods and models, where we think about individuals. In network theory, we think about molecules rather than atoms. And in our tool, NodeXL, what we do is we think about edges as a row in a spreadsheet. We're interested in representing collections of connections in the form of these edges. And an edge is essentially a row of data in which some identifier, call it a name, could be a phone number, could be a bank account number, could be an IP number, could be an email address, could be a user ID. But in just being put side by side with another user ID, another name number, it means that this thing had a connection with that thing. And when we get many of these rows, each of which is a connection, and thus when we get a collection of connections, something emerges, a pattern or a shape comes out of this. And so you can join us on the web and look at a collection of these graphs made with NodeXL at nodexlgraphgallery.org. And in fact, what I'd like to do is drop out of this for a moment and go look. This is a 3D representation of a network, but let me show you here. This is Graph Gallery. Maybe I can make that a little bigger. That's all. And here we've got some recent maps, and each map has been uploaded through NodeXL. And one recent one is the AEHIN Our PH, or Healthcare Social Media PH. I made this right before our talk. There's me. There's Gia. Hello, Gia. And Iris. Hello, Iris. Sorry I'm not there. Good to see you again virtually. This map got uploaded today by me, and it contains information about the 14 people who in the last 4 and almost 5 days tweeted some message that had either this word or this word in it. And we then drew lines whenever somebody replied to or mentioned somebody else. And so this network is available at nodexlgraphgallery.org. It's graph ID 43169. You can look for it in the Graph Gallery. And each of these has a report associated with it. Down here, it will tell you not only that there were that many people and how long it took to get this data. No, I'm sorry, rather how long the data span is, not how long it took to get it. And it will also tell you who are the people at the center of this network and what URLs are being talked about a lot. That includes hashtags, words, word pairs. So let's go back up and look at the top level here. We'll see that there are some additional maps that have been appearing, like the word health informatics. It gets talked about in Twitter. And just a moment ago, I asked NodeXL to go and make the health informatics map. And it went to Twitter, and it asked for a collection of tweets. And Twitter gave it about 1,200 tweets. That's the number of tweets, at least that's how many it told us, there were in 7 days, about 7.5 days, starting today, moving backwards in time. So the last week of the word health informatics. And when we look at this, we can see certain shapes or patterns in the graph. We're going to talk a lot about that. And we can even see who the top people are. And later in the report, we'll see what URLs are being talked about. We can keep scrolling and see these URLs repeated in each of the neighborhoods or subgroups. And then we'll get information about the hashtags in use. So what other words, when we say the word health informatics, what other words, or in this case hashtags, also get used? Healthcare, health IT, HIPAA, bestseller book, high-tech, digital health, and e-health. Interesting. Okay, so we might then want to start a snowball sample. We might want to take these hashtags and go and map them. In fact, we did a few. Let's go back up and see that we did words like digital health or healthcare leader. That's an interesting one. And you'll notice that not all of the networks have the same shape. In fact, certain shapes do reoccur, but not every map has the same collection of shapes within it. Some networks are just small. It could be that while I'm talking to you, you might be tweeting one of these words, AEHIN, our PH, or HCSMPH. And in a few minutes, I'm going to show you how we make these networks, and we'll make another one of these networks. So if you would like to get on a map while we're doing this, you'll have to tweet one of these two words, and then when we make the map, you'll appear. So as you look at Node Excel Graph Gallery, and I'll note there are pages and pages and pages of this stuff. We've now generated in excess of 41,000 network snapshots on all sorts of topics. And when you look at these different maps, just eyeballing them, you'll note they're different from one another. They're not all the same. And yet, after a while, you may notice certain patterns come back again and again and again. So for example, this is HealthXPH. And so we're seeing certain shapes like these circles again and again and again in certain kinds of networks. That circle shape is indicative of a pattern of connection called the broadcast network. Here, Gia, you are the mayor of HealthXPH. And Iris, of course, you're running very close at number 3. But these network maps allow us to quickly consume thousands of tweets for potentially dozens of topics and very rapidly zoom in to recognize who the key people are, what the dominant groups or divisions are, the neighborhoods, if you will, and to identify the themes, the topics, the terms, the summary of the content in each of these discussions. And so in some ways, I hope you'll agree that what we have done in these maps is not unlike taking a picture of a crowd. We've made it possible to visualize groups of people who are present in social media. But what I want to do is show you that these patterns, there we go, this is where we pick up the story. These patterns are not infinite. We actually find that certain patterns occur again and again and again. And recently, last year, we published a report with Pew Research, the Pew Research Internet Project, entitled Mapping Twitter Topic Networks from Polarized Crowds to Community Clusters. And it's a long report, but I would say this one picture pretty much captures the main point of that report. And that is, we used Node Excel. We pointed it at a very large range of topics in social media, in particular in Twitter. About 1.5 million of these networks were generated. It took a while, and thankfully we used automation, so no humans were harmed in the process. But after you make about 1 million of these maps, you realize you have seen this kind of map before. And we actually boiled it down to 6 basic types of network structures that appear commonly in social media systems like Twitter. And they are divided and unified, fragmented and clustered, and the in and the out hub and spoke. And if you give me a second, in the report we give you these little thumbnail descriptions. I'll describe them, and here you'll see it with real data. The first part was just the schematic representation, but here let me give you a little bit of the story of each of these networks. The first one is Divided. That's a group of people talking about United States tax policy. You wouldn't imagine it, but in the US, apparently people disagree, and there's this big polarization, and we can see the polarization in Twitter. Whenever we see a US political topic that's likely to be divisive, we're going to find not one group, but at least two. And these two groups will have relatively little connection with one another. And they will use words, they'll use hashtags, and they'll use URLs differently. They're not going to tweet the same URL. They're not going to tweet the same hashtag. And so what we're seeing is a population divided while they're talking about the same topic. And that's very different from the second pattern, which is the unified pattern, in which there is no division. This is one group. This is a professional or a hobby or a subcultural group where there is not a division of us and them. There is us. And there is a great deal of density of connection, lots and lots of interconnections. It's not just, as you'll see at the bottom, hub and spoke, it's community. The second row is what happens when people talk about a brand, which is they speak about a brand, but they don't talk to somebody else about the brand. They create these fragmented brand clusters. There is a lot of discussion of things like Apple Watch. In this case, you're looking at a map of people talking about the Microsoft mobile phone, the Lumia, but they're not talking to each other about it. And then over in community clusters, we see more people actually interacting with each other while still in the presence of a large fragmented brand cluster. And these four patterns taken together cannot be mistaken for the last two, which are actually mirror images of one another, and that is the broadcast versus the support network, or the in versus the out hub and spoke. And this is when, in the broadcast network, a notable source of information, let's say it's a newscaster or a reporter or a celebrity, they speak, they tweet. And they are then surrounded by dozens or hundreds, in some cases, of people. Those people are retweeting them, and they form a circle around them. But the arrows point inward at the hub because these people retweeted the hub, so they formed an arrow that points at the center. This is the mirror opposite of the last of the six patterns, the out, hub, and spoke, in which a single account replies to many accounts. But unlike very much like the broadcast, rather, those accounts don't connect to each other. So broadcast and support involve an audience or a service population that do not communicate or connect to one another. They're not a community, they're an audience. And so there's a difference in network theory between just having a lot of people talking about a topic and having a dense community of people who talk to each other about a topic. And so when we then look at a range of topics, we can see different kinds of patterns that let us ask the question, well, what kind of a community is that? What kind of a topic network is it? And the answer might be a hybrid. It's a little bit of this, it's a little bit of that. Maybe it has some broadcast, it has some fragmentation, so it has some brand. Maybe it has a cluster with some density, that's the community. So there is a book about this. We're actually actively producing a revised version, an updated, a new volume really, which will be entitled Think Link, and we are soliciting contributions. We'd like to have a more international collection of chapters than we did in this initial book. This came out in 2010. It's been a few years already. So we're updating both the authors and the topics. We're going to add some new chapters, and we would love to hear from those people who would like to write a chapter about using NodeXL to study their domain of interest. This book, of course, came after this breakout bestseller. But let me walk you through NodeXL, and then I'd like to do a demo in the minutes that are still remaining to us. So basically, NodeXL does this for you. It gets you data, it puts it somewhere, it analyzes it, it visualizes it, it publishes it. And in doing so, you get some benefits. What do you get? You get to know who the mayor of your hashtag is. You get to figure out what neighborhoods there are. And you identify the people who might happen to be the bridges that cross those divides. And so you're looking for shapes in these graphs that are distinctive shapes. We've already seen some of these shapes. We've got patterns like the hub pattern, which is easy to see. And the hub pattern is the person with many, many connections. And they are clearly important. There's no doubt about it. But I would like to note that network theory has the ability to answer this question. In what way could someone with just 2 connections have connections that are more valuable than someone with 200? So if the hub is popular, is there a way of identifying the person who is strategic, not necessarily popular? And the answer is sure. You don't have to have a lot of connections, you just have to have really good ones. And so that's our bridge here in San Francisco, that's the Golden Gate, and you know, it only connects in 2 points, here and there, this being San Francisco, over there it's Marin. And so the value of the bridge is not that it's connected to many things, it's that it's the only thing connected to that thing. If you remove this bridge, you have to go a really long way to get to the other side. There's 2 other bridges and about 100 miles of driving waiting for you. In the meantime, the bridge is only 2 miles long. So what about people with no connections? Very important in some ways, and we see them in those other graph images. They are the isolates. They are the indication that something is a brand, that something is a public topic. We're looking for some indication that people can name this thing without repeating it, and brands are a good example of that. So when you use social network analysis to analyze social media, you get to ask some new questions. You get to say, well, what does my network look like? And how does it compare to the networks I'd like to be? And you might then have some plan for intervention, and that's great. We suggest that you make maps before, during, and afterwards in effort to evaluate how did you change the structure of your network. So what I could do for a moment is take you for a quick tour of some important websites. Then I'd like to show you some NodeXL. Here, I would say a very important website is NodeXL Graph Gallery, the place where we like to think of it as Flickr for networks, a place where you can upload your data and also download other people's data. That's a very important feature, that you could come here and get the digital health workbook just by clicking at the bottom of the page. So I do encourage you, if you click on one of these pages, go all the way to the bottom, and you'll see 3 very important links, the link to the data in various formats. You should try downloading some of those. So that's one site worth visiting, NodeXL Graph Gallery. I also encourage you to come and visit us here at the Social Media Research Foundation at smrfoundation.org. This is the home site for our organization, and on the About Us tab, you'll see a large group of happy, smiling people. I think that seems to be a common theme, that if you join the organization, you start to smile. And the interesting thing is the diversity. Many of them are computer scientists, but also information scientists and social scientists and practitioners and researchers. You know what's missing from this page, though? A picture of one of you. That's what we're missing. So we're still looking for new contributors, and so if you'd like to join us, we'd love to add some pictures to this page and get more people involved from around the planet and from many, many disciplines. So that's SMRfoundation.org, also the NodeXL Graph Gallery. This is nodexl.codeplex.com. This is where you go to download the tool. So go to nodexl.codeplex.com. This is also where you can get documentation. It's where you can ask questions here on our discussion tab. And we're very proud to show off things like the details here of our downloads. NodeXL has been very popular over the last several years, and you can see that when we take the long view and step back a few years, you'll see a nice growth curve in our download count. Well, there it is. Good slope. Another spot you might want to visit is my Twitter feed at Mark_Smith. And another place would be the pewinternet.org website, where you'll find this story, Mapping Twitter Topic Networks. Here you'll see at the bottom of this page, you'll see that it's got that figure 3. So this report basically summarizes the idea of the 6 types of social media networks as we found them in Twitter. Another couple of places to look, you should take a look at SMR Foundation in Facebook. There is also a NodeXL page here in Facebook. Come and join us. You'll also be interested to find many slide decks in slideshare.net. Try me at Mark A. Smith. There's the URL on slideshare.net. And then I think if I have it handy, I can show you a picture of my last visit to the Philippines. I will do that in just a second. This, of course, is Las Vegas, not the Philippines. So let me see if I can find you guys. But in the meantime, what I want to also do is demonstrate for you how NodeXL actually works. You saw it just a second ago, the Health Informatics Network. This is it in its workbook. And off on the other screen, there's the actual graph. We usually keep that on a second monitor. What you're seeing here is a series of worksheets. And each of these worksheets has a different dimension of the data about the network. And we spoke about it earlier. This is the most important worksheet. This is the Edges worksheet. And on the Edges worksheet, you're going to find a collection of connections. Each of these is a person who did something with somebody else. Edmund B1 had a mention of DI when he or she tweeted, retweet at @2HealthGuru, CMIO today, CHIO, Chief Health Informatics Officer tomorrow, a URL, and a couple of mentions of various people. And so what you're seeing are the web of connections broken out as a series of rows. On the next worksheet, though, what we see are the people now rank ordered. Each row is one person. Let's rank them now. It's going to take a second for it to sort everybody. But we can sort by attributes that have been calculated, like their betweenness centrality. We talked a bit about the bridge score, how much you are like a bridge. In network theory, your bridginess is represented by this number, which is more technically known as the betweenness centrality score. And so each person gets a row, and each person has a column which is betweenness centrality and each of the other kinds of centrality. We also report data that we get from Twitter. We know how often they followed other people and how many people followed them, how many times they tweeted. We might know things like on what date did they join Twitter, and of course the URL for them. But we also calculate a great deal of information about their content. So here you're seeing what URLs do they mention the most? what URL, what domains do they mention? What hashtags do they mention? What words do they mention? But you notice the second column here, top hashtags in tweet by salience. And that's a technical term. That's actually a metric known as TF/IDF. The salience is a notion of a measure of how much you use a word, not just in raw count. You use it 100 times, you use it 1,000 times, but it says how often do the other people in your community use that word. And so if we all use the word the fact that I use it a lot does not matter. But if we all say the word goat, but I say the word goat a lot, then goat is my magic word. In this case, UKHIP, the magic word is informatics, then digital health. And so this vector of content, this series of words, captures something about each person. It's what matters to them more than what matters to the community as a whole. We then have information about each group and additional information about the content in the graph. We're going to tell you about the top URLs, top domains, top hashtags, not only in the network as a whole, but for each of the subgroups, the neighborhoods we've identified in the graph as well. So in order to create these graphs, all I have to do is go into my NodeXL menu and go into the import menu and pick from one of our data sources. When you get a basic NodeXL installation, you may not have all of these sources. I should point you to this menu item at the bottom of the import menu, the Get Third-Party Graph Data Importers menu item. This points out the fact that there are now about a half a dozen or more different add-ins that add an item to this list. And you might be interested in the Wiki importer or the Facebook importer. For others, you may be interested in the Russian networks, vKontakt and Odnoklasniki. We also even have in progress, not yet publicly available, a Sina Weibo importer. But the one you may be interested in working with initially and most often would be the Twitter Search Network importer. And in this case, we built a query using AEHIN, our PH, or Healthcare Social Media PH. I'm going to copy that, and we're going to leave this version of NodeXL. I'm going to open a fresh, empty version of NodeXL. So that should pop up any second. And what I'm going to do is, that was Healthcare Leader. So here's a blank NodeXL. I'm going to create a new graph for us. I'm going to go into the import menu. So I'm in the NodeXL menu. I've gone to Data, Import, and I'm going to come down here until I find From Twitter Search Network. I'll say yes. It says, well, what topic should I search for? And I will change this from the default query, NodeXL, to the name of our chat today. And I'll say, yes, I'll take the basic network. I've already authenticated to Twitter, and I'll take the maximum amount of information. 18,000 tweets is all that Twitter will give us. And so now we're going to wait. It's gotten some information. And then a key feature of NodeXL takes off, the automation process. Automation is the process whereby NodeXL does all the things that you would have done in the right order to turn your graph from a raw into what we like to think of as your cooked final form. So you're seeing a lot of cooked graphs in the NodeXL graph gallery. Here you're seeing the actual cooking process. And it's a lot like a player piano. I'm not doing these things. I did them once, told NodeXL to do them, and stored that information in the Automate button. Here it tells you what will it do in what order, and the result was a graph, and I will bring that graph onto the screen in just a second. There it is. And this is the result of what we just kicked off, a network that is now up to date to the last few seconds, and it contains the connections among all the people who said the name of our chat today, and that includes me right there. Hello. I retweeted BumbleBest. Hello. And he also was retweeted by BoneDoc, who was also who had himself retweeted C. Mayer, who was also retweeted by Gia, Dr. Gia. And so each of you were connected in one way or another, and we can see that here over on the Edges worksheet. There's Dr. Gia, and you can see a mention. Let me move that over there. There we see. So there's a mention. There's the tweet. That says a reply, and then we actually get there's a reply too. This is a mention, and there. Oh well, thank you for the. That's a thoughtful tweet. Let's see. Well, thank you. So I hope this is some illustration of what we mean by an edge and where does the data come from. It can come from a variety of sources. If you wanted to, you could conceivably just type. We could open up a new blank Node Excel, and we can, if we want, just come into the Vertex, into the Edges worksheet, and into the Vertex 1 column, we could type in something like Alice had a connection with Bob, and Bob might have had a connection with Kathy. And let's spell that right. And this is how you create edges. You could do this if you like. It's just very, very tedious. And so it's a lot easier to ask the importer to go and get you data from a variety of sources. And that can even include your own email. So you can, if you have email on your Windows machine, if you're using Outlook, NodeXL can talk to Outlook, look at your mail, and build a network from your own email. So with the interest of time, let me ask you if there are any other, if there are questions. Let's see if we can take some questions and make sure that I have touched on a lot of these, your issues.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Mark, for the discussion. Actually, we have a couple of questions here.
Very good.
First we have from Arnab Gupta. Actually, he raised a question, but he's asking on any particular case studies of NodeXL used in business or any other operational decision making.
Yes, well, I guess I would point you to Google Scholar is a good place to go. Type the word NodeXL into Google Scholar, and you'll see quite a number of papers, peer-reviewed publications that now have made use of a NodeXL graph of one sort or another. Can I point to an operational decision? Well, I guess I would point more broadly to the role that network analysis plays in many operational decisions every day. You can't search for a web page without using network theory. You can't buy something from an e-commerce site without using network theory. So I guess it would be almost like asking, can I find any examples in which computation are part of a decision-making process? Yes, there are many, many of these examples.
Right, I see. So we also have a question from Dr. Iris. She's asking if can NodeXL identify spammers?
Yes, because spammers often have patterns in the network that don't look like anybody else's. For example, they may not have people replying to them the way that the rest of the graph does. They may end up in a cluster on their own. And their use of words will then have a very big variation from the use or the content vector of most people of the rest of the graph. So yes, I would argue that a lot of spam detection is actually using network analysis below the hood.
Okay, thank you. And we also have a question from Razel. What is the value of social network analysis in social epidemiology?
Right. Well, I mean, in some ways, social epidemiology is network analysis. The concept of infection is the very notion of an edge. Something is going from someone to someone. And so epidemiology wants to see the pattern of this diffusion, often in an effort to either interrupt or, in some cases, when we're talking about inoculation, to encourage the diffusion of a behavior. So networks are at the core of epidemiology. We're always looking for a patient zero, but we're also looking for that factor that tells us how many people each person is likely to infect, which is to say what their degree is, how many connections will they create. After a certain point, a kind of critical mass is reached, and that, of course, is epidemic.
Right, I see. Now, I think this has been discussed earlier, but one of our participants asking if NodeXL can be applied to Facebook, or how can it be done on Facebook, and if we can request for other importers for other sources like Pinterest or any other social media platforms.
Oh, you can request, yeah. Well, we do have fan pages, and so this is the Facebook fan page importer. We have a Facebook group page importer, and we also have an importer for your own personal timeline, and so that's whoever the logged in user is. We also have importers for Flickr, MediaWikis, the Russian Facebook, Twitter, blogs, and the World Wide Web, YouTube, but we do not yet have quite a number of them. We don't have Tumblr, we don't have Pinterest, we don't have LinkedIn, so there's quite a few things. Instagram, so there's a lot of work to do, and we certainly seek developers and funders to help us build additional importers to expand the number of places we can take digital photos of.
I see. Now, I think this would be our last questions, unless any of the participants can still post with the interest of time. The last question would probably be, how can we contribute to the foundation, to Social Media Research Foundation?
Oh, well, what a wonderful question to ask. Let me share some of the answers to that question. How you can help. We are, of course, looking for users, and so you could certainly help by using the tool and writing a peer-reviewed publication. That would be good. You could also help by, of course, helping us find business users who help us sponsor features and development. So when you know of a business that wants social media support, that's one way to help the foundation continue to support the tool. But we're also very interested in what you have just done in this hour, which is the opportunity to share our work with people who could conceivably find use in it. So you've already done that, and for that I will thank you. But we are also very eager to work with graduate students who want to integrate network theory into their research projects. And then, of course, there's always money. But the other thing I would add is development time. So if you know of software developers who are interested in making a contribution to a project of this sort, we are happy to work remotely with many developers.
Right, I see. So I think we're good with the discussion. If the participants would have a couple of more questions, Mark Smith is always online. You can connect to him to Twitter, to his page. So that having said, to just a wrap up of our webinar, basically social network analysis is mapping and measuring relationships and how it flows between people, groups, organizations, and it also provides a good framework for both visual and mathematical analysis of human relationships. So as discussed by Mark, NodeXL is intended for all users, especially to little or with no programming experience. Okay, so that not all the patterns are infinite. We have discussed the Twitter social types of Twitter social media networks, from polarized, in-group, public, Bazaar, broadcast, and support. And we have a couple of questions that NodeXL can also identify spammers because they act differently in the web, in the social media, that SNA is social epidemiology itself, and that networks is at the core of epidemiology. So again, Mark, thank you very much for sharing your expertise on social network analysis, and I believe most of us who attended the session would have more questions, and we'll be sharing the resources as well as your accounts to all the participants through their email. So after this session, please check your emails for follow-up messages and so that we can also get your feedback about today's session. Okay, so thank you, Mark. And to all of our participants, again, this is Gilbert Mina, a health informatics student from UP Manila, and you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Mm.